Hi everyone. One of our discussions this week touches on the idea of ethical egoism. Now there are three different types of ethical egoism. There's the individual type, which is that everyone ought to act in their own self-interest or my self-interest. There is personal ethical egoism, and that is that I ought to act in my own self-interest. And then there is universal ethical egoism, and that is that everyone ought to act in their own self-interest. Some people find these three types a little bit confusing, and so I thought I would outline a few of the problems that are associated with these types and then expand on the ideas a little bit. So one of the problems that we see is that in the first two, the personal and the individual, is that there's no universal theory for everyone to apply. And this is problematic if you believe that we should have a moral structure that does include everybody in the equation and doesn't rely on the thoughts and concerns of just one person. If you can't apply it to all of humanity, is it a good moral theory? That's really what's in question in personal and individual ethical egoism. The other problem is that there's really no consistency. That means that, your views of what is your, in your own self-interest could be different than, let's say, your mother or your friend or your spouse, and that can create some controversy. So there's no consistency in a theory that doesn't apply to everybody. The other problem is that humans aren't acting in isolation. So what you do and what you find to be in your own self-interest might not necessarily be in the self-interest of somebody else. And so those are some of the problems that occur in the personal and individual ethical egoism. Now, the universal ethical egoism has been more accepted for the reason that it is something that can be applied to everybody. So it is more accepted because it has more consistency. And a lot of different philosophers have supported the idea of ethical egoism. A couple of them are Epicurus, who was writing quite a long time ago, ancient times, and one of the huge supporters of ethical egoism in the philosophy world, one of the most popular supporters, is Ayn Rand. And she wrote a series of books that were fiction to illustrate her principles as to why she felt that we should all support ideas of ethical egoism. Her ideas are quite controversial, and initially she was not accepted in the field of philosophy. It took quite some time for her to get established as one of the key proponents. And so I wanted to point her out to you. If you get a chance, there's also a movie on her life, and I think this is a really nice visual presentation of some of her ideas. You can probably find it, I think, on Netflix or Amazon. Now, one of the problems of universal ethical egoism is that people, again, often have conflicting self-interests. So let's say Tom and John are trying to do what's best for them, but they each have opposing interests. And so what Tom wants to do is actually bad for John, or vice versa. So that can certainly be one of the problems. Another problem with universal ethical egoism is that it asks the question, what is meant by everyone? So who do we include in this universal theory? As you have already seen, there are so many diverse cultures with different beliefs on what's right and wrong that how could we come up with a theory that supports all people in all times and cultures? And the other problem is, how do we give moral advice to other people if we have these conflicting views? So those are a couple of the issues I wanted to outline for you, but I also wanted to talk about a positive way of applying ethical egoism. Now, it's been said that if we are too altruistic, and that is self-sacrificing, or we find that we are very dedicated towards helping others, ethical egoism can balance out that problem. And I'll give you an example to explain that further. Let's say you have Mary, and she's a mother of 3 children, and she has sacrificed going back to school in order to raise her children. And so she's left in a very vulnerable financial position when she unexpectedly becomes divorced from her spouse and isn't able to support her children. Now, she has spent her entire life dedicated to these children, often sacrificing long hours and giving up everything that she had hoped and dreamed in order to benefit her children. A way to balance that out would then be to be a little bit egoistic, to say, okay, I want to give my all to these children, but I also need to support myself. I also need to follow some of my own dreams and desires, and I need to have harmony between those two things in order to actually best support my children. And that means that if I'm a little bit of an ethical egoist and I balance that out with my altruism, that my feelings of individual self will be more fulfilled, and then I can feel better about myself and be a better support system to those people around me. So I just wanted to point out that other component to you. It may not be quite as obvious in the material that we read for the week. So if you have any questions, feel free to post a note, email me, or of course you can also respond to my video reflections. Thanks.